Okay. By the way, I've got another
question about this, though, Bones.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you help me with this?
What do you got?
Okay, so are they on a 5 or 7 game series?
The Wolves?
Yeah.
7. Best of 7.
So they haven't played for 3 days.
Yeah, they get a little rest.
How long is that?
Which kind of helps because the Wolves had the play-in and then turned around and played right away and won. Now maybe they take a...
But this is the second game of a 7-game series.
Right.
And they haven't played for 1, 2, and this will be the 3rd day.
A few days.
No wonder the NBA plays still in August.
Oh, yeah, they stretch these babies out. But you think of it, this is the first, it's a first-round series. So you've got a few other series going on. And, if it goes 7, May 1 would be the final game of the 7-game series.
Yeah.
Of the first round, by the way.
Exactly.
It'll get into June. I just thought of another spice.
Who's that?
Let's go to the NBA last night.
Draymond left sideline, directing traffic as always. Finds Curry. Good pump fake on JaMychal Green. Steps out for a 3. It's good and a foul. Curry jumping up and down in celebration, and the Warriors have a chance with another 4-point play in this game.
There's an athlete,
a big pull,
right?
baby.
There's an athlete with the first and last name as a spice or seasoning.
Curry's
Or is that a food?
Curry's a dish.
Oh, it is a dish.
Isn't it a spice?
It's like, have these noodles and give me some curry with it.
I think it's a dish.
Sprinkle some curry on here.
I would love to be proven wrong, but I believe it's a dish.
Why don't you come over for crackers and curry?
Oh.
No. Warriors win over Denver.
It's still it's like a spicier food.
Madam, curry.
Science.
Hurry up and get in here, Bones, will you?
These bags are heavy. Could you curry them for me? All right. So I've got a great story today on a birthday. Celebrate an interesting story. On this date, I was telling Tasha and Don in here, April 19th, 1877, Ole Andresen Aslunde was born. He is known as Ole Evinrude in Norway.
An outboard motor.
So think about this, Joel, and I know we're running short of time, but I searched this, and the Evinrude is the surname which he adopted. It's like his mother's maiden, so they migrated over from Norway and settled in Wisconsin. He became a machinist. And it's like this, like every man, nothing would have been invented if it wasn't for a woman, because men are always trying to impress women. So he becomes a machinist. And in 1907, he invents the first practical and reliable outboard motor. As you know now, obviously the Evinrude, as you nailed it. But the reason why that this got his head, because he was inspired by rowing a boat on the Okauchee Lake, which is a small lake outside of Milwaukee where he was on a hot day. Why? To get ice cream for his girlfriend, Bess. So literally, the man inspired by getting across this lake to get ice cream for the woman that he loves. Eventually invents the outboard motor. I'm to get it done. He eventually marries Bess. Now, unfortunately, she passed at 48. He passed like the year afterwards on that. But in 1912, he started this. He had this firm, 300 workers in that firm. Again, remember the area where he's living, outside of Milwaukee. Evinrude let 2 motorcycle mad teens tinker with his machine shop. One of them was named Arthur Davidson.
Thus, Harley.
Exactly. Isn't that an interesting little how Evinrude and outboard?
How small the world can be.
He's just a teenage.
But imagine being in that shop when you're who you're communicating with.
Think about that.
Right. So you're saying, well, you're doing the what ifs. You know, what if I did this? And what if I did that? And I got to tell you, Bones, there's what kind of gave me goosebumps with that.
Right.
Is there was one of those guys back home in Richland County, Walt Gageland from Barney, who, Walt had a gruff personality, but he just passed away. But he was an old smithy. He was a blacksmith.
Sure. He
was the kind of guy where you'd walk in his shop and then look at him and say, I bet you can't.
Yes.
And
he
you know
did.
what? Well, you know what would happen?
He would.
It would.
It's amazing. I'm glad I researched that today and looked that up.
You wouldn't say that to Walt because he would have thrown it back at you. But
right.
You'd use the word please. I will tell you that.
This, I invented something that you can kind of bring things along. It's called a curry-all.
Curry-all.
That's a callback. Say carry-all. Is there a carry-all?
So there's no crushed red pepper person name?
No, and it sounds like it might be a nickname.
Is there a sergeant?
I haven't checked our text club.
Pepper.
Have anybody? I don't want to be disappointed in my text club.
Remember the rules. Just remember the rules. No nicknames.
No
It's got to be real names.
Yes, curry is a spice.
Thank
curry
you.
powder.
Is it?
Yes.
Nice.
So curry is a
That,
spice.
Miss-
Tell Abby. Curry is a spice.
Miss
Okay.
Dante Culpepper.
Pepper's involved in the name.
Yes.
That's another good
Yeah.
one.
I knew my text club was going to come through for
And
me.
it's a 13-point Tuesday, so these are large today.
Count your points up.
These
It
are
doesn't matter if it's 13. He'll be at 1,300 by the end.
You will win nothing.
The last question will be worth 50,000 times
Right.
more. Come on in here.
All
Let's
right,
not
see you
complain
later.
about Sarah winning all the time. Eck.
Boy, that's first of all, whoever sent that in is a genius.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
just an off the charts genius. That text club 35270. That's genius.
Kent Herbeck.
If the E came before the R and after the H, and then but it's HRB.
Yeah, but they wrote Herbeck.
Herbeck. I'd be inclined to give you some points. Abby's always the judge.
Jed,
I kind of like it. I like the creativity.
I am
it's
so
not,
shocked.
it's,
Synonyms
it's
and
not worth
homonyms.
the full 13.
Okay.
I am so shocked that you two are willing to give anything.
Herbeck.
Yep.
I just like the creativity.
Right. The ingenuity
Yeah.
of that is incredible.
Walt said, going back to Barney, he said,
Yeah.
Walt said he couldn't fix a broken heart or the crack of dawn. Also said, please, and bring a fifth of brandy that would get you in the front of the line.
That's what you want. The machine tools going on with a fifth of brandy
It
going
was,
there.
and I can vouch for this, it was Hartley's, because yours truly did that once or twice.
Do you have people, or you're probably that person in your family that makes things, could carve and
Oh, no.
all that. You're that-
Heidi's husband, Darwin, is.
Oh, Dar
He's
is
the
that
guy, my brother-in-law, Richie, who, is suffering with Alzheimer's now. He could fix anything.
So he could do that.
Yep.
My dad was very good at that, but my uncle Bert was the carpenter, could whittle down this, could make belts, could, just.
I was the breaker,
What?
the guy that broke everything.
Oh, yeah.
I'd get so frustrated. Every time I worked on something, I had scabs for like a
Right.
week. It was
Right.
like, how the heck did I even hurt
Are
that?
you born with that? Or I know
Yeah.
you can learn it.
Yep.
I mean,
Right.
you can go to NDSCS, get 2
personally
years and come
believe
out
that
and make it.
there shouldn't be metric wrenches. And,
Right.
I mean, choose one.
Yeah.
Are we going to put screws in, is it going to
First
be
of
a
all-
9/16 or is
Right.
it,
First of all,
Herb Carneal?
boom,
No.
boom. Now
Uh-huh.
that gets the full
That's a good
13.
one.
Right. That one gets it.
That's
Right.
I loved when Herb and John, because John would set up.
Right.
Now time for Twins baseball. Here's the voice of the Twins. Herb. Good day, everybody. And he'd have that low.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Herb Carneal from He'd just be this
That's exactly how he sounded. Right?
Just-
Don't
he
go
was
back
your
and listen, Abby.
He was your friend. Like
Yeah.
you just felt like you're in the warmth hug of a grandpa,
You,
or a
you
dad.
did. The Aunt Memory moment.
Yeah.
She would hear him, and she's so emotional she'd almost
everybody.
cry. That's Herb Carneal.
Hi, everybody. Herb
People
Carneal.
just loved it.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, Jennifer Benson. She wants to be a Fargo City Commissioner. Let's ask her why. Frank Matichek's going to join us a little bit later. Frank has been one of the leaders in, I would say, opposing the wet corn mill plant up in Grand Forks County, right north of Grand Forks, the city of Grand Forks. Last night's Grand Forks City Council meeting was heated, to say the least. People are upset about the fact that the city council, they feel, is not listening to them and is putting up roadblocks and fighting the petition signatures and those type of things. So we'll visit with Frank about that. I was visiting with our next guest on the break and asking why anybody would want to be on the city commission, because to me, these are tough jobs. Jennifer Benson is running for just that job for the Fargo City Commission. Jennifer, good to have you on News and Views.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me.
All right. The obvious question is why? Why do you want that job?
Right. These are tough jobs. I recall people saying that to me when I was running for school board both times. But, Joel, I'm a Fargo native here, and I really believe in community service. I've been on the Fargo School Board for the last 8 years, and it's really given me an opportunity to see where we can actually strengthen our partnership between Fargo School Board and the city. And there's lots that can be done there. And I think that translates really in the end to more efficient government and what everybody cares a lot about, and that's property taxes and reducing them and creating some predictability there. I see those areas of opportunity from my experience of being on the board, and I want to bring that to the City Commission.
So, because I always ask that question of city commission candidates, whether or not the political subdivisions speak to each other or not, whether or not they, because people, they get that property tax statement or they get that reevaluation, and it just seems like everything compounds.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Yes.
Do you think that the board that you sit on now, the Fargo School Board, communicates enough with the people that lead the city of Fargo?
So I definitely appreciate that you asked that question, because it's a very important question. And I think the simple answer is do they communicate enough? The answer is no. There are several opportunities and several examples I could give you where if we had strengthened that collaboration, things would have been different, i.e., I'll give you an easy example. Mm-hmm. There was a rezoning that happened about maybe 5 years ago or so, right behind the old Kmart Plaza. That is no longer there in South University. The result of that decision for the Fargo schools was we inherited 50 new kiddos at Lincoln Elementary. We didn't have room for 50 new kiddos. And so it was like this scramble at the beginning of the year. Where are we going to put everybody? And so there were trailers brought in for these mobile classrooms. Now, had we had a stronger sort of, communication partnership that is this ongoing working relationship between those subdivisions, that wouldn't have happened. That can't happen. It shouldn't happen. Good, effective long-range planning, right? We need to be more proactive, and that certainly means we need to strengthen that partnership.
When you look at making a race like this, obviously being on the school board becomes part of it, and we'll go back to that in just a second. But the city of Fargo has become this long, narrow city, and I know that's been a challenge with the school board. Where do you put your schools? Where does this go? Where does that go? What school district do you go in? With the city of Fargo, it becomes about amenities. It becomes about water and sewer and everything that goes with it. Do you think the city of Fargo currently is doing a good job with its city planning? Or do you think that it's just go ahead and build and go south?
Well, I think there's a lot to that question, right? And that is that the city of Fargo is really invested in finding out and doing the research necessary to really take the approach of, all right, let's look at this, what we have been doing, what has been working, what do we need to do differently. The Go 2030 plan, the Metro COG plan, the recent white paper, and all of these analysis. Now it's really important to how are we going to put that into action, right? One of the recent presentations I saw Nicole give around planning was really where folks live versus where the jobs are. Right. And how do we connect that? Because they're on opposite sides, lots of them. So really it's identifying those areas that we really need to refocus or focus on, and then having an appropriate plan and implementing them with fidelity and making sure that we have accountability measures to make sure that what we intended is actually working.
What's the biggest problems that Fargo is faced with that they're not dealing with, that they're not getting fixed?
Well, I think that some things aren't unique to just Fargo, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk around workforce and how do we accomplish that. And here's where I can say, there are a variety. Okay, as a city commissioner, really it's their job to facilitate those conversations, right? And bringing the right people to the table to solve these issues or to work towards solving them. Workforce issues are not unique to Fargo, but there are a variety of ways that we can address it. CTE, career and tech ed, right? An expansion there. We can look to our neighboring cities and states that have had successful partnerships and that have resulted in, how do we get greater internship opportunities to our kids in high school? How does that help? That certainly helps. Look at General Electric and their partnerships with the schools, and that provides then if those students are able to get that hands-on experience, then also in return have a job once they've graduated, right? Whether it's high school or college, that also puts more money in their pocket in terms of earnings in the future if those companies are helping to pay down some of that debt for people. So it's a win-win, right? And that's just one example. But it really goes back to facilitating that partnership and that collaboration.
So there's 15 people in this race, and you want one of two spots.
Right.
I mean, that's an amazing number of people.
It is.
You've got approval voting now, which is a whole different method.
That's right.
Of getting elected. How do you separate yourself? How do you go about saying, look, out of these 15 people, I want you to recognize me. I want you to, because a lot of what you just said, it didn't shock me that the first thing you said when one of the biggest challenges is workforce, because everybody knows that, right? And everybody says that, and I get it. That was the right answer. But my point is, I keep hearing all these things, and you're competing, as you said, against everybody else for this workforce. How do you separate from others on how to resolve some of these issues?
Yeah, and I think that's what's important in that is to remember what is the role of a city commissioner, right? What is the role of an elected official? You can't look to the government all the time to solve our problems, right? But they should be able to facilitate what is necessary for those groups of individuals and entities and partnerships, whether it's subdivisions or private partners, to come together to work on solutions, viable solutions for the city.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the right answer again, in the sense that I'm trying to find the people, and I said this the other night in the mayoral debate, which is that separation.
Sure.
That if you elect me,
sure,
you're going to get this.
Okay. Well, if you elect me, I will work hard for you.
right.
And Joel, I think I've proven that over the last 2 years, right? I will work hard for you.
Well, and you haven't, I'll give you this. You haven't been afraid to say what you think and be in the middle of controversy.
That's right.
And we'll talk a little bit about that, because it's a city commission, and whether or not you get something done. One of the seats you're running for, Tony Gehrig, nothing. I mean, Tony brought an aspect to the commission that few would. And I always respected him for that. And he always took the slings and arrows. But you could argue that he never really got anything done. And I know Tony's listening. I don't mean that as a slap. I'm just saying that at some point you got to pass something, right? And so I want to talk about that as well. So Stick around. More coming your way right here on the News and Views Radio Network. Welcome back to the News and Views Radio Network. Jennifer Benson is our guest. She wants to be on the Fargo City Commission. Before I forget at the end, if people want to know about your candidacy, where do they go?
Yes. Oh, thank you. They can, I do have a website, Jennifer Benson for Fargo.
Okay.
And so they can find me there. They can reach out to me there. My email, same, Jennifer Benson for Fargo at gmail.com.
And I know you're on Twitter, and I know everybody, you go to Facebook, and you're going to find all of that as well.
Yes.
So I want to talk to you because your time on the school board has been exciting. Let's use that word. I could say controversial, but the Fargo School Board censured you. Is that the way to put it?
They have twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a board with different personalities on it. I think it's only fair for you to give, because if I'm going to hire somebody to be on the Fargo City Commission, I'm going to want them to be able to work with everybody on the commission. And so I want to give you a chance to speak to that, because if people elect you to this post, they want you to get things done, as you said.
Yes. Thank you for asking. And as you mentioned earlier, in the earlier segment, the importance of having differing viewpoints on a board and the necessary, because here's the thing, we're supposed to be representing all of Fargo, right? And all of Fargo is not going to agree 100% of the time. So our elected representatives should be reflective of our city, right? And those that put us there. And, I truly believe that where I got in trouble was basically because, for my continued advocacy around accountability. And, the first time was really for working to hold administration accountable and for numbers and representative of numbers and data sets. And the second time, the most recent time, was really, again, about what is within an elected official's purview in terms of their authority. And so, that was the masking conversation and masking kids. And really, I don't believe that is within our authority. I do think that as an elected official, it's our job as elected officials to protect your rights, your individual rights. It is your job to make health decisions for yourself, not for others. We cannot do this one size fits all. So I, sitting in that seat, you have to make hard decisions, right? And I think that as a leader, that's what we expect or should expect of our leaders, that even in the face of difficulty, even when they come at you personally, you have to remind yourself, you took an oath when you took this job. And that's what I did each and every time.
So do you think that it was personal, that these were personal attacks?
I think some of them were, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I asked the same thing of Tony Gehrig, which he was kind of that lightning rod on the Fargo City Commission. He chose not to run again. But, if you're going to be effective being on the Fargo City Commission, you're going to have to work with the other city commissioners. Yes. If people buy that Benson product, if they want her to be okay, I'm going to send you there. You're going to get my vote. Are you going to be effective? Are you going to be able to work with the other city commissioners? Yeah. Or will it be similar to what people saw on the school board level?
Well, that would certainly be my goal. And really, that's very important. Like that, how I approach situations really is I want to have as much of the information as possible, right? Before we make a decision. I want to be an informed decision maker. And to do that, you need to ask questions and you need to be willing to seek to understand, right? Continue to ask why until you do understand and until you do have enough information. And sometimes people don't like that, right? Sometimes, and it comes back to, again, accountability. And for me, it's trust but verify, not just blind trust.
Okay. Let's do just a little quick rapid fire on what the big issues would be on the commission. Number one, should the Fargo Civic Center be knocked over?
A good way to start right there.
Well,
Just
right. I mean, but it's right when I walked into the newsroom today, it's what everybody was talking about.
Right. Well,
I think because of the administration.
And it's been sitting empty, right? And it costing the taxpayer dollars to let it sit empty. And again, I think the answer to your question really would require, I think, people to come together and let's talk about what we can do with
So you haven't made up your mind on that
I
yet.
haven't made
What about tax breaks more tax breaks for downtown Fargo versus other areas?
I think it's important to recognize, and I haven't yet found a person that doesn't say, things like the Renaissance Zone and initiatives and tax incentives. haven't been necessary. They won't tell you that, right? They won't say that. Most people agree that they were necessary, right? But now we're at a place where if you look into the most recent economic white paper, there are things that we can do or shift moving forward that we need to do. And whether that's in limiting these incentive packages.
One more time, your website.
Jennifer Benson for Fargo.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yes,
Thanks for coming in.
You bet.
Day, ladies and gentlemen. You know what? There's love in the air up in Grand Forks County in the city of Grand Forks. If you've been following the issue of the wet corn mill plant, I know here locally on the east side of the News and Views radio network, Tyler Axness has just done a great job on Afternoons Live, making sure voices are heard when it comes to the concerns that are raised with all of this. Well, we stole one of the people that he counts on, and that's Frank Matichak. Frank is he's a township guy. He knows what it's like to be out there raising a crop and dealing with cattle. And this is a guy that's seen Grand Forks in a lot of different phases in his life. And when I heard him on with Tyler, the one thing that came crystal clear is he doesn't believe communication was happening with the people that live there versus this was just dropped on their lap. And so last night at the Fargo City Commission, they decided not to let the people of the city of Grand Forks vote on whether or not they felt there should be a wet corn mill plant there. And I wanted to get Frank's take on that. Frank, good to have you on News and Views.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Give me your take on what happened last night at the Grand Forks City Council.
Well, it was the meeting started at 5:30, and I think it was over like at 12 or 12:30. It was kind of a marathon thing. The city council kind of set everybody up. They wanted to do the presentation again for the Fufang people, and actually last night was the first time that anybody from the Fufang group actually even got up and spoke. But they wouldn't let them. They wouldn't let them ask the people in the audience. They wouldn't let the people in the audience ask any questions of the Fufang representative. So that was kind of a slap in the face too. But anyway, what happened was there was the people that wrote the petition are from the city of Grand Forks. Faulkner Township didn't have anything to do with with that actual petition. That was set up by the citizens of Grand Forks because they were really I don't know how to tell you this. They were really upset, I guess, about the fact that the city council was pulling all this stuff and not letting the people in the city know, and as well as people in the township didn't know about it. So it was kind of a situation where they decided to put a petition together, and they got over 5,000 signatures. And of course, they're going to throw some out, and I think they ended up with 4,700, and they needed 3,600. I don't know the exact numbers, but somewhere in there. So they had enough legal signatures to put it on the ballot, and then the city attorney decided that he'd find case law someplace, and he found a case in Ohio, and that's what he used for the basis of his throwing out the petition or for the vote. So there were some people who were upset about that. We kind of thought maybe the city council would say, come on, let's let the people vote. But they really didn't. They talked about it a little bit, but they didn't really push it through. So I think that was a big disappointment for a lot of people last night.
So let me ask this, because
Sure.
I alluded to this, Frank, before. You gave me that update, but it just
Sure.
feels like nobody talked to you. It feels like, oh, by the way, Frank, in the city of Grand Forks, this is going to happen, take it or leave it. And while it could be good, it could be something that would be good for the state of North Dakota and another place to sell corn, nobody talked to you about the logistics, where something that's going to happen in your backyard. And I want to get your take on that. I want to find out if you feel that same way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We were blindsided on the township. We did, Faulkner Township, we got 90-some businesses here, and they're going to take 70 of them on the annexation. And they're basically taking these annexations of these businesses, and they told us at the very first meeting, we need to annex these guys because we need their specials to help this project go through. And that's, it's a large amount of money for a lot of businesses. And these businesses, some of them have been here 65 years in the township, and now all of a sudden the city wants them. It's just kind of a bad deal overall. Are people really against the corn plant or a place to sell more corn? No, but we're against where it's going and how it was handled. That's the biggest problems with this whole situation. And now it's got to be, we know it's better for you, and we're just going to do it.
What's the repercussions? I mean, I'm sitting there. Frank, I'm sitting there watching the highlights and watching the
Sure.
Reading the articles and whatnot in relation to last night's commission meeting, but it's like they're fearless in terms of the public coming back at them. And by that, I mean this, that there's less votes. The mayor received less votes for mayor than what are on that petition telling him to put this to a vote. And usually politicians are fearful of not getting reelected again. I mean, is there a movement up there at all to say, look, you're the wrong person for the job?
I've seen an awful lot of people stand up and talk at the city council meetings and say, by the way, Mayor, I voted for you, but I'm not in favor of what you're doing here. So I don't know how, as a politician, how do you take that? Does that mean if you run again and you don't do the will of the people, is there a political, some political consequences there? I don't know. But I've heard that more than once, because a lot of people did vote for this mayor, and but he's pretty well hell bent on leather to put this thing through. So
what about your township? What power does your township have in all this?
We don't really have much, because the state, in their wisdom many years ago in the 70s, decided to let cities like Grand Forks and Fargo and bigger cities have a 2-mile extraterritorial zoning regulation around the city for orderly growth, which is fine. But basically, it was just to make sure that nobody built on quarter lines or section lines or easements or stuff like that. But now it's turned into just a land grab, is what it basically is, just for this one plant. And this plant's just on the wrong side of town. The city spent $100 million for Red River Biorefinery, it's called. Well, it's down in shambles right now. They got caught dumping waste into the English Coulee. They got caught hauling stuff out to gravel pits out in Grace Township. And that's the kind of thing that we want to avoid having with this other plant. So, the track record of the city is not good with some of these industries. Period.
So if you have people come to you and say, Frank, the reason you didn't get to know more, the city didn't get to respond before they made all these decisions, was the fact that the Chinese don't do business this way. That look, we don't want to lose these 200 jobs, and because of those 200 jobs, you're just going to have to take it. What would your answer to those people be?
Well, I mean, come on, Joel. The economic development, it's no secret. These guys are talking about what a great job they had to get this thing here and all this stuff. Come on. These companies go to whoever's going to give them the most, who's ever going to give them the best deal. We were told we couldn't tell you because we were in secret negotiations. They were looking at other sites and other cities, and we couldn't give away what we were going to do to these other sites, that we might lose the whole project. Well, come on. These things go, these companies go to whoever's going to give them the best deal. Plain and simple.
Has Governor Burgum reached out to you in your group? Has he?
Not me at all. No.
Okay, and here's the reason I asked that. They didn't talk to you beforehand, and they declared victory right away, right after they put this in your lap. The citizens of the area, say, listen, we should at the very least have been talked to. They put all this together, voicing their concern. The city commissioner council last night says, tough, this is going to happen. It would seem to me that the Chinese got what they wanted. Okay, so we can understand that. That's business. I think that their business practice was abhorrent. That's businessmen and how they act sometimes. But the government of North Dakota that was behind all this, working on this, they work for you, Frank. You just got done paying your taxes to them. Has the Department of Commerce or the governor reached out to you or your group in the sense that, hey, look, this is what happened. This is why we're doing what we did?
Well, I'm sure it would have made some kind of a difference. I mean, if we would have had some say in the very beginning of all of this stuff, I want to point something out, Joel. First of all, it doesn't matter to me whether it's a Chinese or not. This plant is just in the wrong place. It's got the millions of dollars that have to be set up to get these guys infrastructure, which they're basically not paying for. They'll say they are, but they're not. It's coming in through the city. The city says they'll be repaid. I mean, all the questions, the odor question, all of the stuff that's going to happen with this plant is why it's not right. It's just not right for here. You know, we're kind of almost like Castleton a little bit here. We're not against this plant. Just don't put it there. Move it out of town. Move it someplace further away. And the other thing is it's going on 370 acres of some of the best farmland in the area, period. And that land is all going to go out of production just for this one plant.
You say that it's not about the Chinese. The reason that I brought up the Chinese...
To me, it's... No.
Yeah.
No, to me, it's not. But
no, I know,
I would say 10, 15% of the people that are opposed to this, that's part of the reason.
But the reason...
their main reason.
The reason I bring that up, though, into the conversation, Frank, is because of this. They're used as the excuse on why they wouldn't talk to you. Because, you know, the Department of Commerce is saying, well, we couldn't talk to you because it was the Chinese, and this is the way they do business. And so it's like the Chinese are a scapegoat, but yet the Department of Commerce's job and the governor's job was to talk to you. And so it
and
seems,
they didn't.
Right.
There was nothing.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Frank, we've got your number. You go do chores. He's like, I'm doing chores, Joel, but you gave me some time in a hurry here, so I appreciate it.
You called me early enough. I got them done just for you. I got them done ahead of time. So
always good to talk to you, Frank. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Talk to you later. Yep.
Bye. Frank Matichek, ladies and gentlemen. When he was going on Tyler's show here in the afternoon, they were in the lobby, and I just horned in right away and just were like, all right, you know, talk to me. And what you found was individuals that were just so honest and so sincere. Let's get to the Weather Cave and find what's going on in our forecast. The three examples I can give that are the best of where James Lehman and or Lamont or whatever you'd go by, the head of the Department of Commerce, and Governor Doug Burgum. Governor, if you're listening to this matters. Okay, I know that the governor is very used to getting his way when it comes to projects. I know that the governor at Great Plains and Microsoft was very used to getting his way, but this is people's money. This is development that affects people's lives. And, you know, when you look at the wet corn mill plant, when you look at the soy crushing plant, these are two opportunities to sell corn and sell soybeans that farmers didn't have before they would have been built, right? Because if they're built, that can be a good thing for ag production. I understand it. But it's how you go about any project. No one named someone king. I mean, nobody said you have complete authority to do as you so desire, no matter who you run over in all this. And there's no question that the governor's office is 100% behind in promoting and touting Summit Carbon Solutions, right? And so for you saying, okay, what's Summit Carbon Solutions, Joel? They're taking a pipeline and they're going to take it across North Dakota, east to west, and they're going to inject carbon into the soil in North Dakota. And it's going up to coal country, I believe, is where they're going to do the injection. So whether that's a good thing scientifically, whether that's a good thing environmentally, whether that's and the word environmental is not a big red flag to roll your eyes and say that's a bad thing. But that's neither here nor there. The farmers that are fighting this aren't fighting it because they're green farmers in the anti-environmental movement eyes. The reason they're fighting it is because somebody's trying to go across their land without talking to them about how they're going to go across their land. And they're using words like eminent domain. And, and when you deal with each farm, and I've pointed this out, every farm is its own business. Yes, they benefit collectively from a farm bill, but it still affects every lone business differently. So keep that in mind. So if I'm Summit Carbon Solutions and I'm sitting down with the Abby Miller farm and I'm saying, look, Ab, I'm going to cross your land. Here's what I'm going to give you. It's a good, fair deal. Da-da-da-da-da-da. That's one deal I'm trying to make, right? Then you go to the Joel Heitkamp farm. Well, okay, Joel, listen, da-da-da-da-da-da. That's all fine and dandy. But what you find out with farmers is if you treat one differently than the other, you got a fight on your hands. What you find out from farmers is that if you act as though their land isn't their land, you've got a fight on your hands. And some of that's happening in Grand Forks because this is happening in their backyard, in their township, on the edge of their community. Nobody's talked to them. And so because the excuse of, well, that's the Chinese and that's how they do business, or that's the way the Japanese do business on the edge of Castleton, you don't work for them. You don't work for them. You work for the people of North Dakota. And Summit Carbon Solutions is the perfect example. You can high five and say this new technology and this is going to be good for North Dakota forever. But you know what? You still work for each one of those farms in North Dakota. If you're going to be involved in putting it on their doorstep, then you better be involved in making sure they get the best deal they can. That's why I asked Governor Burgum if he was going to pledge that he wouldn't allow eminent domain be used on these individuals' property. I asked him 3 times on air. He said yes in the end. There's your ace in the hole, farmers. Now it's your job to point out that, you know what, you should talk to us before any of this gets put down our throat. We'll take your calls on it right after this. Might Arthur Farms have an interest in the Grand Forks plant decision? Another one, eminent domain is used for the benefit of the people, not one oil-rich non-resident. Another one, KF Joe, it's like I'm listening to an episode of Yellowstone. Go John Dutton. I'm going to take that as a compliment. Another one, get oil company reps on to tell you why Biden policies are oppressive instead of using White House talking points. All in. I got a whole stack of things here that I want to get to on that. Another one, Joel, that can't be right. It's taking 300 acres. Thorolson ethanol plant is very large and doesn't have that much land. I remember from the conversation they had with Tyler about that, the 300 acres is what they're buying. It isn't all going into the plant, but that's what they're taking up. So that's what I remember about it. Joel, Grand Forks corn plant. With prevailing northwest winds, the residents need to understand that downwind smells like, well, Joel, it's not a pleasant odor. Another one. There it is. Why would the Chinese be willing to be that close to our air base? It needs more investigation, if you ask me. Lots of production with drones and heavy aviation out at that base. Okay, let me get back to what is my biggest talking point with all of this. From listening to Frank Matichek right now, what you heard was nobody talked to him. These township officers are elected officials. They deserve to be reached out to and told, look, this is what's happening. And the reason I injected, the Chinese, that word into the conversation isn't because I'm anti-China, anti-Chinese, nothing like that. Isn't because I'm worried about some foreign entity owning something here. I mean, that's a debate for a whole nother day. The reason I brought it in is because it's being used as an excuse. The fact that, okay, we were negotiating this deal, and if we would have told you, if we would have tipped you off, that isn't the way the Chinese work. That isn't how they do business. So just be thankful and be trustful of us that this is what happened. And so we couldn't tell you, but we landed it, and so it's time to celebrate. We're going to be there with that great big scissors, and we're going to cut that ribbon. And the same can be said about Castleton, right? Now, I don't think you're going to find too many corn farmers or soybean farmers that think that having a plant anywhere near them is a bad thing. It's one more place to sell product to. I get it. I understand it. I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of people maybe where that injection site goes for Summit Carbon that are against it, because you know what? There will be a job or two there where it's getting injected into the soil. But the jobs argument, during construction, obviously, or where the huge number of jobs are, the jobs argument is getting to be a futile argument, right? Because if I'm a businessman and I'm sitting there saying, well, okay, I can't find workers. I just can't find them. And then the government comes in and kind of in a backdoor behind the scenes deal says, oh, by the way, this one's going to take that many jobs and this one's going to take that many. And I'm that business that can't find a worker. I'm not jumping up and down going high five. I'm not. And so I believe that when things like this happen, you tell people. And ladies and gentlemen, I was in tough rooms. I was in rooms that they would have rather shot me than have me walk into when I was building rural water systems. I mean, I was. I went into a meeting room one time, and understand the competitor, supposedly, I don't believe it is that much, of rural water systems is well drillers, right? So you've got well drillers who feel that rural water systems took away a huge part of what they did. I think they're right about that. I completely think they're right about that. You've got well drillers who believe that rural water systems were subsidized by the government, and because of that, they lost business. And you know what? They're right about that as well. They were 100% right about that. So what's the best way to deal with it? Not to just sit there and say, well, okay, tough break. We're not going to talk to you. No, you go to their place. You hold a meeting. You go to their town hall. I remember sitting in the Geneseo or Cayuga, I think it was Geneseo, community hall, and having a meeting where we were open to getting people signed up for a rural water system. In that meeting was a community leader from the area. Great guy. A great guy. He owned actually 2 different companies that drilled wells for a living. They were at that meeting. They didn't like what I was doing. And rightfully so. They didn't like what I was doing. I don't blame them for not liking what I was doing. Also included in that room was somebody who was in the business of putting in water softeners, right? The water that we were going to deliver out there was way softer. So what happens? You sell less salt. You have less need for water softeners. Although I'll tell you, I've got a water softener at home and I'm on raw water. That being said, there's my free plug for water softener systems. But that being said, they were in the room as well. They weren't digging Joel Heitkamp. But I was in the room. Nothing had happened yet. Nothing had happened yet. There wasn't one shovel of dirt that was displaced yet. We were open about what we were going to do before we went out and got the easements to do it. We sat there, we took the slings and arrows, and we were honest about it. And, you know, we told them, yes, the government is paying a huge percentage of this. We sold them on the project based on health concerns, people getting better drinking water, the rural area deserving what the cities have, which is major grants to build water systems in these cities. And why not the rural area? So we did get grant money. We did go out and get financing from the federal government, both in the form of low interest loans and grants to build this water system. And when I started, we had 500 miles of water line. When I left, we had 2,700 miles of water line. That's a lot of construction that I oversaw. That's a lot of construction that a lot of people worked on, not just me. And we got done. So, do you make friends doing that? No, not always. But people respect you a lot more, and you're successful at it if you don't run it up them. If you don't just have them wake up one day and there's a trencher in their front yard, and you say, oh, by the way, I'm going to use eminent domain to cross your land. You don't do that. You don't do that. Now, in some circumstances, do you go to the local township and ask for an easement to access township right away? Yes. Do you do that with the county? Yes. I can tell you another example. We had a township officer who didn't want the pipeline on his side of the road. He hated rural water, just hated it. And so he made us cross over to the other side of the road to where it was wet, where it was worse, where there was a lot of reasons not to put it, because it had to, for his quarter of land, go on the other side of the road, or the township wouldn't sign that agreement. Was that good governance? I don't believe it was. I think that township officer was very self-serving in the decision he made. But those were the rules. You adhere to the local rule. And he got the rest of the township to go along with him. Did it create a bigger mess on the township road? Yes. But they knew that when they decided it. So here we sit. Why in the world wouldn't you then go out there and make your argument and say to the people in Grand Forks and Castleton and the farmers that it's going to cross their land, get them all together and collectively say, look, this is what's going to happen. This is what your state government's involved with. Because this whole notion of I can just use an excuse, that's bull. You work for them. You work for them. And for you folks whose land, Summit Carbon Solutions is going to cross, if in fact this gets built, I want you to think about this. Just think about this collectively. And maybe you need local organization to advocate on behalf of you. But they're going to give you a one-time fee to cross your land. That's what they're going to give you. They're going to make money on that pipeline every year. Why in the world wouldn't you collectively, call it a union, call it whatever you want, sit down with them and have a discussion on a percentage. I don't know what percentage is fair, but a percentage every year of what they bring in on a gross amount. And then have that divvied per footage. In other words, why is your land any different than that land over there? Why play this little one-on-one game when collectively you have the power to do this or not? And then every year you would get a check. Because if there's no eminent domain given, you hold the key. You hold the key. And believe me, there are a lot of farmers out there that are not on my side of the aisle that have called me thanking me for getting the governor to say that. There have been a lot of farmers out there who know that the ball now is in their court, and they collectively can sit down. And this is no statement on whether it's a good project or not. It's about how the project gets built. And so, Governor Burgum, if you're listening, you work for farmers. You work for North Dakotans. James Lehman or Lamont or whatever, the head of the North Dakota Department of Commerce, quit patting yourself on the back and quit looking in the mirror. Because when you've got North Dakota people who feel they haven't been talked to and it affects them the most directly, then I would ask you this. Find out where you live, and tomorrow I'm going to let you know that there's a wet corn mill plant going to be in your backyard, and see if you get mad. Let's get to the Weather Cave and visit with Too Tall Tom. Tom? best attorneys I think I've ever known. It says just set up the easement that'll pay annual payments based upon the consumer price index, or do it based every 5 to 10 years, period. The rent goes up over the life of the easement, just as land values do, as you know. Another one, I said, well, they're paying one-time fees. He says they don't have to. The law doesn't require it. As a matter of contract, the parties can agree to any form of payment. That's why I've been advocating for what I've been advocating for. Hold on, Aaron, I'm sorry that I clicked you on there. And here's the other thing. Where's the local leadership? If I were still in the state Senate, I would be getting everybody whose land this crossed together in a hall. I'd be sitting down with them and saying, all right, what's going on? How's the state treating you? What's happening here? How can I help? Because I do get paid to be your state senator. And if they said, fine, nothing, no big deal, we're good, I'm done. I'm out of your hair. But it's called work. And that's the type of thing that the Jason Heitkamps don't do. They don't do the work. They just want to rush in front of a camera. It's like, look, if you want to get in front of a camera, do your work. And then maybe a camera will want you there. Now, let's get to Aaron. Aaron, you're on News and Views.
Yeah, you're talking about this Chinese building another plant. They're going to own us pretty soon. They got, Helena and some of these other chemical companies are owned by the Chinese. PV got bought out, which is Gavilon now, by the Chinese. We need to stop allowing them to keep building here and try to get some groups, maybe 100 farmers, 1,000 farmers, whatever it takes, and build some of these ourselves.
Well, I don't think anybody would disagree that this would be way more popular if it was a co-op, and then people know as well what's going on. Todd, I got 40 seconds, bud. Sorry.
Money politics is taking over good politics in this state. We don't need the Chinese or Brazil or anybody, any foreign company, owning our food production in this state or in this country. That needs to stay here. And if China can't back us up on Ukraine and supports Putin, we need to send them a message that we want nothing to do with their crap.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd. I think using China as this is the way they do business is a big red flag for me. If that's the way they do business, then I don't want to do business with them because you don't throw something right in people's backyard without talking to them. You don't. That isn't who we are in the Midwest. When we come back, should the railroad bridge be tore down across the Missouri River? We'll talk about it right after this. We're going to get to you. I give you my word. Also, somebody sending me some articles in relation to how this is going in Iowa with the CO2 pipeline, and the same questions are going on in Iowa big time. There's an article here that has a lot of passion in it about what's happening in the halls of the Capitol in Iowa. But, when you talk about passion, full disclosure, when I go to Bismarck-Mandan area, I get to see the railroad bridge all the time. Not only because you can't miss it if you're in that area. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's one of the most beautiful things that North Dakota has that's man-made on its landscape, and they're going to tear it down. I mean, that's what the federal government is going to do now that there's a new railroad bridge that's going to be going across the Missouri River. And so there's people out there that are trying to advocate for and find someone to advocate for them in regards to how they could resolve this, how they could keep it. Well, Tracy Potter, the name Aaron Oban. Well, Tracy's someone I served in the Senate with, and he was appointed to fill out the term of Aaron Oban. And just for the record, there were many people that called him from both sides of the aisle and said, Tracy, run for the job. And so he did agree to do that as well. But he's raised the question of what the state role could be in the railroad bridge. And so I called him and I said, Tracy, come on with me. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Tracy, good to have you on News and Views.
Well, thanks for having me, Joel. It's good to talk to you again.
Let's talk about what you've asked the state of North Dakota in regards to the railroad bridge. What was your request?
It's a simple matter. I want the Attorney General to answer the question of do the citizens of North Dakota own the riverbed of the Missouri River, and therefore the bridge that's over it? Because if they do, the Attorney General knows the statutes. The State Historical Society immediately becomes involved in any time the state property. They have to say, does it have historical significance? Well, they've already said that, So what would happen is the State Historical Society would take possession of the bridge, and these people that are advocating for turning it into, walkway, green space, bike trail, connecting the various trails in Bismarck-Mandan, they could spend their money on that. And helping the state preserve and protect it rather than having to purchase it from BN.
So as it sits right now, it's deemed to be federal property or the railroad's property, or how does this work, Tracy?
The railroad says that they own it. And they say that they own it because of the land grants that were given out to the railroads back in 1864. But the lawyer for the Friends of the Bridge, Lyle Witham, who used to be an assistant attorney general here and has had a pretty distinguished career. He wrote a 58-page memorandum at the start of April, and it says, no. When the state of North Dakota came into being in 1889, they gained control of all the navigable rivers and naturally their stream bed. And so if that's the case, then that bridge certainly is the people of North Dakota, and the Attorney General may find that. If he doesn't find it, we're at the status quo where we are today, which is the Friends of the Bridge are still advocating to the Coast Guard that no, the state of North Dakota owns it. It's just, is the state of North Dakota going to join in this?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my bias, but this is why Tracy was good at what he did, because he wasn't afraid to get his feet wet this time in the Missouri River in regards to what has been a tough conversation. I mean, Tracy, anything that this has to be almost unanimous in the Bismarck-Mandan area to keep that railroad bridge. It might not be a railroad going across it, but to keep the bridge itself. I mean, it defines the community.
Absolutely, and it isn't. It is not at all a partisan issue. The Friends of the Bridge, or Mark Zimmerman is the director. He worked for Ed Schaefer for years. he's on that. It's not at all. And the other night, I just ran into a mutual acquaintance of ours who's a prominent Republican who's run for federal office a couple of times. And he's going, this is one we can all agree on. I said, absolutely it is. Absolutely. And so, yeah. I was appointed to the job. And as soon as, even before I was appointed, I was looking at what was happening, and apparently the Attorney General had dissuaded state officials from asking for an opinion, saying that the state's not, no state agencies involved. And when I saw that, I went, no, a state agency is involved, so it must be that no one has made the formal request. And as a state senator, you have that right. You can ask. And so as soon as I got appointed, I started digging into it. And finally, yesterday, I delivered the letter to the Attorney General.
Well, full disclosure, Tracy Potter, ladies and gentlemen, state senator from Bismarck, understands the historical society and significance of many things across the state. I mean, you've lived in that world, Fort Lincoln, everything else, Tracy. So, I mean, the minute you made this request, they instantly must have said, all right, let's make sure we get it right, because he's going to know if we get it wrong. That was what I read right away, Tracy.
It does make a lot of sense that I happen to be the one doing it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Actually, the bridge arises in District 35 too. So,
yeah, so that's your home area. So
yeah, exactly.
I have to ask this. Let's assume that the Friends of the Bridge and you and others can make your argument, and in fact the state, because it is on the banks of the river, and the state owns the banks of the river, that you do own the bridge. Let's just make that assumption. Does the state want to own the bridge? How much maintenance is on the bridge? Is it in a state of disrepair? I mean, I know I'm taking you down a whole different road than what you had asked for, but Heidi lives on the Mandan side, by the bridge. I know, right. I've seen it all the time, and I never see anyone working on it. Never. I mean, it is the most solid thing that I think the state has structurally.
Joel, I actually wrote about the construction of the bridge in a book on steamboats in Dakota Territory. It's a remarkable piece of construction. And here, I've got two answers to your question. One of them is a little flip, and that is, if the state owns it, it doesn't matter if they want to own it. They own it.
That's true. That's true.
But the fact is that I think that you mentioned Fort Lincoln, and that was we were a private organization that worked with a state entity. And that's how I see this transpiring, is that the state will own it, but it'll work with local community groups that want to improve it and maintain it and use it as part of the trail system in Bismarck Mandan, pedestrian trail. And it's a whole different thing that if you have to maintain it, that you're going to have railroad cars going over it as opposed to walking paths and that kind of thing. So I think it's very doable. And given that Bismarck Mandan really is a tourism hub with all the history here of Fort Lincoln and Lewis and Clark and Skagwea and all that stuff, you put the bridge in there and it becomes a jewel. It's like the crown jewel in our tourism operation here. And I think you'll find that the State Historical Society, the State Tourism Office, the Bismarck Mandan CVB, the Parks Districts, they'll all be interested in how they can tie into this thing.
Well, I'm in the radio business, which means we're into sound. And when somebody says, hey, it really doesn't matter if the state wants it, it's that's the right answer. If the state owns it, it really doesn't matter if they want to. They own it. So, Tracy, right. Off and running. That's what you are as in your return to the North Dakota State Senate. It's really what I was getting at earlier, and you might have been busy and couldn't hear me, but here's the truth. State Senate positions get paid 12 months out of the year. And so you get paid to work. And, in different parts of the state, no one is facilitating a conversation like you are with the bridge. They're not it drives me nuts when these farmers don't have anyone advocating for them when somebody's paid to advocate for them. And so what the heck is going on? Give me that one.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when I made up my mind to run this time, I said, I'm going to be disciplined. I'm only going to run on property tax relief and pensions for state retirees, because this is the district that, of course, has more of them. That's all I'm going to run on. And that's actually is what my campaign is about. This is something I'm just doing because, yes, I have to go to work as a state senator, and I've got 8 months on the job to do things. You got to hit the ground running, and you have to work. And so I go over to the committee hearings and I study the stuff. But this is one that I could do. All those people that are advocates for the bridge, all those people on the Friends of the Railroad Bridge Committee, all of those people, none of them had the authority to ask for an attorney general's opinion. I did. Yep. And so I did it.
And you do. So thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for calling.
Yep. State Senator Tracy Potter. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the weather cave and find Mr. Too Tall, Tom Szymanski. It's just I got free lunch out of the deal. Somebody said if somebody wanted to make me a bet, I would bet $27 million against our attorney general. Why $27 million, you think, Ab?
Is that?
I mean, why that? I don't know.
Oh.
I was hoping you would know and say,
No, I
Joel,
don't know.
you missed that point of it, the $27 million. Did you ever wonder whether an attorney general would make a decision based upon the fact that he didn't want to do the work? I mean, think about it this way. If you're Drew Wrigley and Tracy Potter has come to you and said, look, this is the argument that attorneys, even an attorney from your office has made, that we own the land as the state of North Dakota on both sides of that river. When you made us a state, we own the land, okay? So, therefore, we own the railroad bridge. I mean, you're letting her go. It's ours. It's part of it, and that's the whole historic thing. When you make it a historic site, it isn't like somebody can just come in with a bulldozer and knock over Fort Lincoln. It's there. It's part of it. And so if Drew Wrigley decides this isn't ours, I mean, he's in a tough spot here. He's in a tough spot. If he decides it isn't ours, everybody's going to know he chickened out from the fight. If he decides it is ours, saddle up, because the railroad's going to take you on, and taking on the railroad isn't always the easiest thing. But you can't be afraid of the fight, right? If you're afraid of the fight, you shouldn't have the job in the first place. And Drew Wrigley rushes to the front wanting any government job he can get. Well, Drew, if you're listening, now do something with it, okay? When we come back, I got a bunch of stats here when it comes to oil. We called Lynn Helms. He didn't get back to us. I don't think Lynn's jumping up and down to talk to somebody that doesn't want to polish his shoes and might ask him a tough question here or there. So he's not coming on. But we're going to give you actual facts, not speculation, when we come back. 5948 1-800-880-5346. I said that I was going to take you down the road of statistics when it comes to oil. We called Lynn Helms. He's head of the oil and gas division in the state of North Dakota. And when I think I was in the legislature when they made him, no, I think it was after. But what they did was, instead of being a regulatory agency, they turned it into both. So it was there to regulate and to promote oil development in the state of North Dakota, which to me was a huge conflict of interest. Because if you're a North Dakotan, now you're putting a lot of trust into somebody to regulate an industry that he's out schmoozing to come be here in the first place. The two don't go together. They don't. The folks that should be encouraging oil development should be the Department of Commerce, not the Oil and Gas Regulatory Commission. So that's a whole aside. What ends up happening is you end up getting word that, this and that when it comes to oil production. And in the end, there's rules, there's laws, there's things in place that they have to adhere to as far as the oil industry in relation to what is going on in terms of gallons pumped, how many wells, those type of things, right? So let's just do this. Let's just go over a little bit so we have fact versus fiction in regards to what North Dakota is doing with its oil production. And what you're going to see is that let me go back to 2020. Okay, who was president in 2020? All you Biden haters, who was president, right? When it comes to wells producing, back in 2020, you had 12,220 wells producing, right? For a large part of that. You had 12,686. And then as you get closer to 2021, the number picks up, right? When you're sitting there right now in terms of well production during 2021, you get to 16,477, right? Then the right now, as we sit right now, we're looking at 16,451. Can we make an argument that that's way higher than 12,220 wells? So let's not say that they have been stopped from producing. Now, when you make the argument that you can't produce on private lands, the Biden administration never stopped them from pumping on private lands. They stopped future development on public lands. I mean, they never stopped them on public lands from doing what they were doing. They stopped them from developing in the future. But now they've opened that up, and they're still mad about it. I mean, they're still mad about it. And you want to know why? Because you, as a taxpayer, are going to get more because of it. That's right. The oil industry is going to have to pay a bigger percentage to the public that they got the oil from. I mean, that's just the truth. That's the truth. So when you look at the percentage that they're going to have to pay, it goes up 1% or 2%. And so, yeah, you get to drill on public lands. Nobody's stopping you from drilling on public lands. But get this, understand this, you're going to have to pay a higher percentage to do it. And that's a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. And you know why it's a good thing? Because they have record profits. Record profits. Record executive salaries. They have gone nothing but go up and up and up. And during this oil shortage, they've gone up even more. And so you're sitting there looking at a situation where it isn't in their best interest to do anything other than bitch about it, when in fact they're the ones making money because of it. Right? So now, when you look at the price per barrel of oil, right? And you look at where we're at, do you want these figures? Because what you're going to see is a drastic increase. You're going to see a drastic increase when it comes to revenue made during the Biden administration, the anti-oil administration, right? We can go to metric cubic feet, and we could look at a huge percentage there in relation to after 2020. Now, Okay, you're going to say, Joel, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and say so much of what's happening in our economy today is because of COVID. I'm not trying to have it both ways. I'm trying to tell you the truth. That for all of you who say that the Biden administration is the reason that there's a shortage of oil out there, understand this. The world opened up and it kicked in. And the oil industry is going to catch up to that. But in the meantime, that money that you're paying in the pump, they're benefiting from at a far greater rate than what they have before. While they bitch the whole time about how, boy, the Biden administration is stopping us. They won't let us drill on public lands. The Biden administration is stopping us. They're putting every regulation they can against us. Do you know what the price of what they can get for the natural gas is? It's double now. And yet you go to Western North Dakota and what do you see? You see it still being burnt off. Now you could make an argument back when it took off. When the oil industry took off, you could make an argument that they weren't ready to harness it. They didn't have any place to go with it. Okay? Make that argument. I get it. I understand it. But how long's that been? I mean, how long has that been? How much more time do they need to be able to harness it, store it, and pay the people, the ranchers, the farmers, the rights that they have on it so they're not seeing their money burnt off when it comes to their mineral rights? I don't know why. It's because it fits a political narrative is what it is. It's because it just fits into what people want to say. Let me give you the exact numbers. The royalty rate for new leases. Now, we're talking about the fact that public lands are to reopen for oil and gas drilling under Joe Biden, right? But instead of paying 12.5% to a royalty, they're going to have to pay 18.75%. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo. Do you think that'll stop them from drilling? They're going to make sure that the production fits what their narrative wants to be when it comes to their profits. Do any of you, when you pull up to that pump, do any of you care that the oil industry is setting record profits right now? They're playing this game, ladies and gentlemen, and they are playing it on you. And the reason they're playing it so well is because they've got you believing the narrative that they want. That's why. That's why. And so we can sit there and have a conversation with Lynn Helms. We can talk to him about, gee, Lim, why are you guys out there saying that the administration is stopping the oil industry from succeeding when they're setting record profits? When the executives have never made this much money before, when it's going through the roof, when daily oil produced and the price of it is at a record. Nobody's stopping them. Nobody is stopping them. I mean, you can see it right now. When you look at the only time that oil production went down was during COVID, and now it's climbing back up big time. Big time. I mean, the numbers are there. The absolute numbers are there. You can spin, you can talk about it, you can do all of that, but you can't change the fact that the numbers are there and they have to report them. Now, I'm going to say this one more time. The oil industry, if you think it's not political, if you think that isn't part of what they do, understand this. They weren't allowed to ship oil outside the country. And yeah, I'm going to brag about my sister. I'm going to brag about what she did with some of the people that oppose that and bringing them collectively together and saying, look, this is an industry in our state, and I need your support at making sure that this industry can act as other industries and they can ship their product overseas. And she got a bunch of Democrats that never were in favor of that to do it. In other words, she did her job, and she did it well. And she did it at the request of and the lobbying of and the ask of the oil industry. That's where it all started. They were like, look, we need help. Nobody else got it done. Nobody else got that done. And yes, part of the problem was some of the Democrats were blocking it, but she got it done. Harold Hamm asked, she delivered. What happened? Immediately following that, Harold Hamm became the financial chairman of Kevin Cramer's campaign. So 1-800-UP yours when it comes to Heidi and her race, right? We don't need you anymore. We got what we want. Well, if you think that can't reverse itself, it shouldn't now. It shouldn't now, because we are at war in our own little way, right? Europe is taking the hit when it comes to their needs for oil, and shipping oil over there and having Europe support what NATO is doing is a good thing. And it still shouldn't quit, but it will someday. And I will just say this to a state that is so dependent upon energy. Keep this in mind. We can sit there. We can sit there and put all the eggs in the basket of the oil industry, and the oil industry can put all of their eggs in the basket of crude oil, and they're going to get caught someday. Because here's the deal. They're going to make Ford F-150s electric. They're already doing it. And so I just bought a Ford pickup, which I've bought how many times, and it's gas. And that'll probably be the last Ford pickup I'll get a chance to buy that is fuel oil driven. And believe me, I wanted it. I don't have recharging stations all over North Dakota, but there will be. There will be. There'll be fast recharging stations, just like you stop at Clearwater in Minnesota on the way to the cities. People pull up to the pump, they plug in. It takes about 10, 15 minutes, and they're off and running. And they're running for, longer. They've got reliability. They've got power. They've got everything that you want. It's going to happen. And it's not because of unadministration. So, and for all of you people on the other side of this issue that are like, gee, the government hasn't subsidized us when it comes to wind, when it comes to, some of the renewable ethanol. Okay? That's our heart and soul. The Biden administration just took E15 into the summer. But don't go around saying that, boy, we're not subsidized. You are. You are subsidized. Understand this. The tax credit, everything that goes into it, you're subsidized by the federal government, and it's worked. And that's a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. That's a good thing because it's working. We raise corn. Just don't be hypocrites about it. And look at the numbers. And don't just sit there and fall into a narrative when you go to the pump and you're paying $3.80 or whatever. Abby, what did we pay yesterday when we grabbed fuel?
$3.78.
Right, because we've paid that before. We've paid for it in previous administrations, but don't sit there and fall for this is Joe Biden's fault. It's all Joe Biden's fault. It's Joe Biden's fault. Number one, you got a war going on where there's a demand for fuel, right? There used to be a lot of oil that came out of Russia. Nobody's taking it anymore. Then you add in the fact that the world woke up after COVID and said, that's it. I'm heading out. I'm going to move again. Me and Judy are going to be hitting the trail and taking the RV to the Black Hills. I mean, so just understand that. Don't fall for the narrative. And if you're the oil industry, understand either you change and adapt or you're in trouble. And that's just the cold, hard truth. Let's get to the weather cave and visit with Too Tall Tom. Tom? 6 to the phone lines. Let's get to Robert. Robert, you're on News and Views. Go ahead.
Yeah, Joel, thanks for having me on. Hey, I just have a couple of issues. I'm out here in the oil field area, and I don't work in the oil field, but I live out here in Williston. And anyway, my opinions are definitely different than yours. But my first question is, you're quite upset over the financial current success of these oil companies. My question would be, what do you feel about Apple, when all the combined oil companies in America aren't worth the valuation of Apple? Well, are you upset with Apple?
I think you're misrepresenting the fact, Robert. I'm not upset that the oil industry is making profits. In fact, that's good for my state and good for my region. I'm upset that they're telling people they're having problems when we're paying more at the pump because I believe it's a lie. They're not having problems.
Well, and then the federal lands issue, they've opened up, from what I've read, 20% of the federal land and kept 80% of that federal land closed. So how do you argue that as being, real beneficial?
Here's how I argue it being beneficial. Number one, I haven't seen the 20% number. You're going to have to show me that, but I will argue this one to you. The federal lands, they were told that they couldn't drill on federal lands. That was the narrative that they put out, right? Right, Robert? They were out there saying they couldn't drill on federal lands. They were drilling on federal lands. What they couldn't do the minute Joe Biden got in office was they couldn't develop future wells on federal lands, and he just reversed that. Now they're mad, even though they can go back to federal lands. Now they're mad because of the fact that the percentage goes up of what you and I get as taxpayers for what they do on federal lands from 12.5.
I don't have an argument. I don't have an argument with the royalties.
But that's what the oil industry is mad about, Robert.
Yeah,
Robert, do me a favor. Call back in tomorrow because this is a great conversation. Good riding with you, folks.